In this lesson, we're going to learn how to create a piece of geometry to block our rendering so we only render what we need to. So here's where we left off, and I've just opened up 08 Begin, and if we jump over to our channel box and our layer editor, we can jump to the reflection layer and see we have this reflective surface. So let me just call this our reflection surface. And so now let's actually duplicate this, just Control D, and let's Control H hide it from our reflection layer, but in our master layer, let's Control Shift H to unhide it. So now we have this piece of geometry that we can use to say everything outside of this frame we can essentially cut off. So an easy way to create that piece of geometry is to right click, select edge, select all these edges here, and let's extrude these out. I'm going to double check that my keep faces together is turned on, and then I'm going to hit extrude. And let's see, we want to extrude these out from our image so that nothing outside of this original square gets rendered. So I'm going to right click now and choose face and delete this inside face. So now we have essentially a cutout for our render. And now we can see that this cutout is cropping off some areas, but not all the areas we need it to. So I also wanted to crop off this bottom part of the neck here. So let's again right click and select faces, and let's select this piece of geometry. I'm going to jump into perspective view now, and let's extrude this out a little bit. So let's again hit extrude, and let's pull this out. Okay, that looks good. So now everything inside of this geometry will not be rendered. Now we may want to pull this piece of geometry forward a little bit so we just have consistency here. You can see very tiny sliver being cut off. So let's just move that forward ever so slightly. And I actually do not want to cut off any of the hair, so this looks correctly positioned right now. So let's go back into our Maya camera, and now we can see what will ultimately be rendered. Okay, it's looking good. So for this geometry not to render, let's go back to our object mode here, and let's give this a new material or a new surface shader. So let's go to right click, assign a new material or assign favorite. Let's assign it a surface shader, and let's give its out matte opacity down to black. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a cutout which is just essentially black, which has no effect on our alpha. So everywhere this geometry is will have no effect on the alpha. So if we hit render now, we're going to see just the head. Now we might still see the camera in the background, but it's going to be surrounded by this nothingness, which is going to be helpful for our render times if we had this whole person in here, as well as for our alpha. I just hit escape to stop this from rendering. But now we can see our head is nicely in the alpha. However, the rest of our scene is still in alpha, so when we actually turn in, or we actually render this, we're going to want to turn off our image plane. But for now, we can keep it turned on because we need to do one more thing, which is create a cutout for our reflective material. If we can take a look at our render layer, and if we just take a look here in our side view, we can see that half of our head is behind our reflective layer and half of our head is in front of it. Now when we render out our reflective layer, we're not going to have any idea what is in front and what is behind. So what we need to do now, let's say in the next lesson, is come in and create one more render layer, which is going to tell us whether our reflection is in front or behind our head. So in this lesson, we simply came in and created a new piece of geometry on our master layer and assigned it a new surface shader to limit what gets rendered out of our image. And again, this is to better define what we're seeing as well as not render anything that doesn't need to be seen.